Hey, what up, young scholars? It's your boy, the ex Dolores Professor, coming to you live from Dad Cypher. And what we have is one of the most iconic young guests that we have that is in actually the motherland, Porsche Steele. And she's running an emancipation, not program, but a movement. And all of this is talking about generational wealth. And we're not just talking about, making sure that you are passing down money from one generation to the next, which is important as well. But we're talking about the type of jewels that we can give our children that's going to last not only for our generation and their generation, but maybe the next 4 or 5 generations down the road. Because it is an old adage in proverb that says that one man or woman influences 5 generations behind them. So we have to make sure that we're doing it. But with no further ado, give it up for my guest, Porsche, to the show. What's going on?
Hi.
All right. So if you would, please just tell the viewers a little bit about the Emancipation Movement, and then we're just going to jump in and just have a discussion about, just my particular 2 cents of what it means for generational wealth. So share with your viewers your Emancipation Movement and what it's all about and how can we get involved.
Okay, so the Emancipation Movement is a movement that requires Black people to get together and force the change that we've always been talking about, okay? And the one way to make that change isn't really to march or protest, which is fine. It's great that we do that. But the best way to force change is to change ourselves. And the only way we can do that is if we have knowledge. So many other races and cultures are born into the knowledge that they need to succeed, to become great people, and not just financially wealthy, but to have a better family, come from a stable home, to be able to raise their children up so that their children can become the people that they need to become and have the careers that they want to have. But Black people, there's so much information that we are not born into. You know what I mean? Like, I was 25 years old when I found out that Black people should invest in the stock market. 25. I should have known that when I was a baby. Like, what happened? And it's not my parents' fault because they weren't taught that. I was not taught the importance of emotional health. I wasn't. And so traumas that I experienced growing up really impacted me and my siblings, but we weren't taught how to deal with it. And so for some of us, we dealt with it poorly. But if we had known, if we were given knowledge when we were younger, we would be better off. So I don't have kids yet, but best believe when my babies are born, I'm going to instill as much knowledge as I possibly can. And that's what the Emancipation Movement is about. It's about freeing ourselves from that. And our slogan is rising above the shackles. We have so many shackles and chains binding us to our oppression. And it's not just from our oppressors, because we chain and bind ourselves. But we want to rise above that. And that's what the Emancipation Movement is. And we're kicking it off this Juneteenth at a free Zoom event. So we're inviting everybody to come RSVP to the Zoom event, where we're going to have 8 ambassadors of 8 aspects of Black life. And they're going to serve as the drops in the bucket, so to speak, of knowledge. And we're going to extract as much knowledge from them as we can. And then we're going to have a roundtable discussion about it. We're going to have raffles throughout, so there'll be a little bit of fun. We're going to be jamming. There's going to be good music playing. And then at the very end, we're going to have investment hand-ups, where we give people tangible investments. I'm not just talking information, but I mean actual physical investments that you can use to pursue whatever you need to pursue. Whether you need to fix your physical health, maybe you want to get in a better shape. Maybe you want to fix your mental health. Maybe you want to pursue a dream. Maybe you want to become financially stable. Anything you need, we're going to be giving it to you. So we encourage people to RSVP using the RSVP form so we know what it is you need, and then we'll help you get it. And then, of course, after the event, we're all going to take to the Facebook group, the Emancipation Movement on Facebook, And there we'll be able to ask each other questions and give knowledge. It's just a safe space to really discuss and learn from one another. Because I've learned so much in the last 2 years than I ever have in my entire life, just by having basic conversations with them. And they didn't say, oh, Porsche, you gotta pay me for that. No, like it was just information. And that information was the investment to help become the woman and the wife and the business owner that I am. So that's what it's about.
Hey, that's super dope. And believe it or not, you are ahead of the game because some of these things that you are mentioning, I'm just discovering in my 40s now. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, it is. Well, what I would say this in a lot of African American communities, and I don't want to say all, but in a lot of African American communities, especially those of us that come from a marginalized environments, there is where we inherit not generational wealth, but we are inheriting a generational deficit. And what it is like that lack of information passes us down from one generation to the next. So what we have is, it shouldn't be in the year 2000 that I'm the first male in my immediate family to go to college, to have a PhD. But what we have is, and it's a result of slavery, Jim Crow, and post-Jim Crow, where that deficit of information has taken place. Now, one of the biggest things that I would say, and that I hope that we can get into, is this whole idea of storytelling and what that means in the Black community in terms of ways to transfer knowledge, ways to ensure that we are educated, and ways to ensure that we have strong mental health. So one of the first things that let's get into is this whole idea of education. So the question that I have for you, when was the first time you had an educator of color?
Actually, in kindergarten. I was lucky enough. Wow. I didn't go to Head Start. In kindergarten, my educator, my kindergarten teacher, was my aunt. She worked that's cheating, I guess, but she worked at the school. She was the kindergarten teacher, and so my mom insisted that we put in her class. So everybody knew her as Miss Harper, but she was my Aunt Sandy. So I was in Aunt Sandy's kindergarten class, and she was a Black woman, so she was my instructor in kindergarten. But after that, let's go there for a minute, because I mean, this is one of the rare opportunities that I ran into a person that actually had a teacher of color. I guess I had a couple in my inner city school, maybe first, second, and but however, when I transitioned to quote unquote a good school, I didn't have anyone that looked like me at all. So so I want to go with your aunt for a second. Let's think back to this time of kindergarten. What was it that stuck out in terms of the way that your aunt educated you? What are some things that you remember that really resonated with you as a young lady being educated by your aunt? It's funny that you asked that, because I just thought of another educator that actually stuck out. See, with my auntie, it was different, because I can't really say it was different because I was Black or she was Black, but we had that relation. So she already treated me different because I was her niece. So I don't know if it was kind of like a Black connection type of thing rather than a familial connection. Mm-hmm. So with her being my auntie, I wasn't allowed to get away with nothing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I misbehave, she will beat me, and she can. But I think back to my third grade teacher. He was, besides my Aunt Sandy, my third grade teacher was the only Black male teacher that I saw, and he was like, black. There was another black teacher when I was in kindergarten, but he was one of those people that, well, he had issues. I remember he connected a little too well with all the white girls. And I remember thinking me and my black friends thought that was strange, so we kind of just stayed away from him. But the one black teacher that really resonated with me, and I think he would have been the only black teacher I had after that point. I'm talking third grade. So from third grade up to high school, there was probably only one other black teacher that had an impact on me. So, but his name was Mr. Bowman. And what I liked about him was that he noticed something in me, and he treated, and I don't, and a lot of people will call this racism because, I don't know, but he treated all of his black students differently, and he applied more pressure on us. So it was like anytime, let's say like a white student didn't turn their assignment in on time, or they were talking to class and shouldn't be, he would fuss at them and then be done. But if one of us black kids did something wrong, I remember noticing that it was like he was disappointed in us. Like he wasn't just reprimanding us. It was like, how dare you? Like, and I went to a predominantly white school. It was in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh. So I went to Linton Academy, and it was predominantly white. We had to learn German. So that tells you a little bit about the school.
Right.
But he applied pressure on us differently, and even me specifically, because he knew my parents. So it was like, you better do good, and if you don't, I'm gonna be pissed because I know you can do better, and you are representing us here. So if you don't do what you're supposed to do, understand that they're gonna look at you funny. And he never said that to me, and I didn't realize that until I was in high school. Like, I started thinking back on, education at that time, and I just remember thinking, dang, like Mr. Bowman, he made sure us black kids were right. Like, he instilled information in us, and he was a history buff too. So it was like we got a lot of African American history through him. And even like I was 6 or 7, like, you know what I mean? So it was very impactful. Very impactful.
Well, you know what? And this is where we start when we're talking about this whole idea of generational wealth and that sort of thing. What we find is, we always want, although I'm not trying to be an advocate for segregation and saying that segregation was right. But one of the things that we did have in African American communities was a wealth of Black educators during segregation. And we're talking about these individuals came from HBCUs. They were esteemed scholars, and they really wanted to instill in young people. Basically, it was beyond just the 3 R's. It was more of, I want to teach you not only the skills of formal education, but how do we survive as a person of color, and how do we thrive as a person of color. But what we have found is over the last 20-something years that Black educators have been reduced to like 20%, and out of those 20%, only 2% are Black males. So what we find is this sort of deficit that I don't know, how the next generation or the next 5 generations will overcome, because having a teacher of color is different in the sense that what you described is this person had expectations. They looked at you as family. They gave you information outside of the text. They were on you because they knew that they saw you. You weren't invisible.
Right.
I would say, well, you're younger and you've been through the experience. From my experience at a predominantly white school, when I transferred from inner city school to a PWI institution, I felt invisible. So, and this is coming from somebody that was growing up in the 80s and 90s. What is it? What was your experience like? When you were, because you described yourself at a PWI, what was that experience like? And do you think that it gave you something that did they really invest in you, or did they leave a deficit in you?
I wouldn't say they left a deficit, but I don't think they invested in me at all. I don't.
Okay.
The principal of the school, a sweet white woman, of course. I really liked her. She was really nice. But I don't remember being made to feel like this was my school, that I fit in. But I was always kind of a loud kid anyway. So in a school where I made to feel invisible, I would refuse. And I would do whatever I can to be at the front of anything I could be at the front. So I spent my elementary school years striving to be the center of attention. And I don't know if it's because I came from a large family where we had so many siblings, and if you don't do that, you will get lost in the shuffle. Or if it's because of the school I went to. But it was always important to me to be the one that the teacher saw. And I had mostly white teachers, but I always made it a point to be in their face, like, okay, well, this is what I'm doing. Like, let me help out so you can know who I am. And I was like, I got called the teacher's pet a lot growing up, but I guess it was just because I don't like being neglected. I don't like being lost in the shuffle. And so I remember seeing so many students being invisible in that school. So many, especially at that school. I remember being in like 4th or 5th grade, and I had this one teacher, and I just thought it was funny that she always gave her attention to the white students. And it was like the rest of us, whether we did good on an assignment or not, we were kind of neglected. Or she would call on the white students. And so at that point, it's just like, well, what's the point of even raising my hand? Because you're not going to call on me because there's another white student here that's smart, and you think that student is smarter than me simply because they're white. So what's the point of raising my hand? So many students would just stop. And the next thing you know, we would funnel into the back. So then we essentially segregated the classroom without even realizing that that's what we were doing. But that's what we did. We ourselves segregated the classroom because the teacher would focus on the white students. But me being the type of person I was, I refused to do that. I refused to just get lost in the shuffle. And so I would purposefully do things to make sure that teacher saw me. So I would like try to get my work done first. Or when she's like, here, let me pass things out, I would like run up and snatch it from whatever white girl was trying to take the paper. You know, so I wasn't, I was kind of annoying, but I made sure that I was out front because I have to be. If I don't get lost like everybody else, I'll just be another black student. I'll just be another statistic and nobody's looking at me. Nobody cares. And I refuse to be that type of person.
So now it helps to bring up another question. Do you think, how much should we put on the teachers, or should it be more blame placed on the parents or the students? I would say with me as an educator, I try to go out my way to engage and to reach students. But I feel as of late, it's very hard for us for teachers just to connect with students regardless of race, just to, listen to the material that's read. How would you divvy up the percentage of, so we could get more Porsches and that sort of thing? How do we separate it? How much belongs to the parent? How much belongs to the teacher? How much belongs to the student? Would you say, like, from a percentage standpoint?
If we're talking about elementary school students, okay, I would say it's 10% the student, okay? 30% the teacher, and 60% the parent. Because I feel like I was the way I was because I was raised the way I was. It was my whole life. I came from a house, the house was always filled with people. So if I'm not shouting or screaming at the top of my lungs or pissing off my parents, then it would be really hard to get their attention. So since I was doing that at home, it kind of bled into me doing that at school too. And like my dad always made sure that, you know, he always communicated with me about how I was doing in school. My mom too. They would always ask me how school went and stuff like that. And so that upbringing made me want to give them a story to tell when I came home from school. So I would go to school with that idea like, I'm going to put on a show. Because when I come home, I'm going to let my folks know what happened today. You know? So
that, you know what, that is amazing because, you know, in a sense, your relationship with your parents, because you knew they value education, made you also, in a sense, become a storyteller in the sense that I have to have a story that's going to engage. And you know what, it is so important when we talk about basically people of African descent, because so many of us learn through story. I always say that people of African descent value oral tradition. I mean, it's like whether it be preaching, whether it be hip hop, whether it just be the guys that basically shit talk on the corner, we learn through the power of the spoken word. You know, it's like that word sound power and that sort of thing. And so, you know, one of the things that I found amazing is that you felt that need to engage in that sort of griot tradition. I would probably say as an educator, I love doing storytelling because I feel like it helps my students to really visualize and being able to take in those lessons and that sort of thing that we need. So let's shift gears. And you know, when we're talking about the Emancipation Movement, we're talking about this whole idea of educating. And the people that you named are great, vivid storytellers as well, and that sort of thing. So what is it that you see as one of the most pressing concerns when it comes to educating young people? And then I'll let you, then I'll share what I think it is. So what do you think is one of the most pressing issues in terms of shackles? What are some of the biggest shackles that's really impacting young people in terms of education?
That's a good one. I think, and this is a really broad shackle because it covers so many different areas, so many aspects. But I think one of the biggest issues is connection. It's so hard for parents and educators to connect with kids today. Like, I was just having a discussion with a friend of mine, and we were talking about Black people in general, not even African Americans. This guy is Nigerian, you know? And it just seems like it's in our DNA. But we were talking about raising kids and the difference between this generation and previous generations. He was talking about reading, and he was like asking me how much did I read when I was a kid and stuff. And I was like, oh, I read all the time. We have books and books at home. You know, I read. But the kids from this generation, well, they don't necessarily have to. You know, there's smart devices that give them instant information without them needing to read an entire book in order to get it. They can get information in a fraction of a second. So, that was one of the things he was talking about. And then we got into technology. And I'm like, I know it was a struggle for my parents, but I was blessed to have young parents. I essentially grew up with my parents.
Right.
So the things they learned, we were taught. But I remember having friends whose parents were like already in their 50s or 60s by the time we were like 10, 11, 12. And so their parents had no idea the type of music they were listening to, any new technology they were using, anything that they liked. There was such a huge disconnect there that is like, there's no way that their parents, they can have a relationship with their parents because their parents aren't even trying to connect with their child. So it's just like, oh, I don't know, this new thing you're into, that's not, I don't connect with that, I don't vibe with that. But my parents never liked that. They were young, so they liked what we liked. So that connection was stronger, and that helped in education. So I was able to learn from my parents because they weren't that far away from me in age. But even if they were, let's say they were. My dad is a musician. My dad is a rap artist. My mom, she's always had a playful mindset. My auntie who raised me, she also had that like fun mindset. She loves babies. She loves children. So it was like, no matter how old they'll get, they'll always have that younger mindset. So it's just so easy to connect with them. And so it's easy to learn from them. Imagine if they didn't like anything that I like. They didn't know about my life at all. How can I expect to learn anything they have to teach me if we don't connect on some level? And I think like that's not even with kids, it's with adults too. Like if you have a piece of information that I need, something that I don't know that you know, how can you attempt to share it with me if you and I don't even vibe? Like we don't even connect. So I'm not even gonna try and hear what you have to say because we don't connect. There's no connection there. So I think that is the biggest shackle, is that lack of connection. We don't connect enough with one another in order to educate one another. Because Black people love to get mad when somebody tells them something. Like, you know what I mean? Okay, like the whole thing with Monique that came out. Monique she just released a video where she's talking about young women go to the airport wearing bonnets, PJs, and slippers. Right. And she was saying how she felt. She was like, you guys are supposed to represent the queens of this world, the queens of this country. But you're going to the airport looking like you just rolled out of bed. Now, what does that say for your representation? And a bunch of people were mad at her. And it's like, is she wrong though? Is she wrong? So, Black people don't like being told what's what, especially if they don't connect with you. You have to have that connection first. And then I think it's easy to, educate.
Okay. So I agree with you. I feel like one of the biggest shackles is the lack of education. And it reminds me of something that T.D. Jakes said. He said that one of the things that his daughters admire about him is that he's never afraid to be a sophomore again. And I feel, and I try to prop myself on that too. Because I'm an educator, I believe that we always should be learners. And so I learn just as much from my students as they learn from me. And I really feel like that is a big disconnect. And I want to say that probably even started back with the civil rights generation in the early hip hop generation, because when you had Calvin Butts and C. Dolores Tucker and Jesse Jackson that was like running over hip hop CDs and really like basically telling the next generation, you have nothing of value. We don't want to hear your stories. You have let us down. And you just kind of feel like you're the wretched scum of the earth in a sense. So definitely I think we had one of the biggest shackles is generational gap, which probably has led to this sort of generational deficit where each side is not really listening to one another. So it's sort of this chasm that's connected. But I want to say one of the other shackles that stick out to me, and this ties into education as well as it ties into mental health, is a lot of children today, and I would say this trait is especially detrimental for young students of color, is the lack of emotional intelligence. In a sense that I can teach you math, I can teach you how to write, but I cannot teach you how to navigate a situation. I cannot teach you how to, in a sense, feel a level of self-esteem and a level of pride and dignity, in a sense that when things don't go your way, that I learn that, I handle it in a way that's not going to be detrimental. I really feel like a lot of our struggle comes from this lack of emotional intelligence, in the sense of that we live in a society that is above reproof, that takes any form of criticism as trolling. And, and it's, in a sense, it's very hard for students to take any ounce of critique. One of the things that I have struggled with as an educator is the fact that I kind of cringe when it comes to giving children constructive criticism, because it's not being viewed as I'm critiquing the work that's being produced. It's as if I'm critiquing you as the individual. And so it's really a lot of thin skinness and that sort of thing. And even if you disagree, it's just ways of being able to agree to disagree. It's really a push on where we are making a lot of young people very narcissistic, as if it's just their view. The beautiful thing about storytelling, and we talk about this in the Black community, is that idea of call and response. The preacher is not just preaching a lecture. He's like, can I get an amen? Can I get a hallelujah? We do this back and forth thing. I just feel like, and it could be with social media, it could be with Twitter, we're having one-side conversations. And then when we look at reality TV, how do they show how to deal with conflict? There is no emotional intelligence. It's throwing water, it's fighting, it's that sort of thing. So what I find is I have a lot of bright students, but the biggest thing is anytime someone will give them any criticism, it goes from 0 to 100 real quick. And then it gets to the point where I'm worried for a lot of these students that will go out and just say, well, I'll quit, or I'll find a way to get back at the boss, or all of these different things, because it's not about that. And sometimes it's about doing things right, because that's what you're supposed to do. We look for a lot of extrinsic values, and it can't really work that way. But then this what gets me about the whole idea of storytelling. Is storytelling, in a sense, for me, let people know that you're not the first one to go through it, nor are you going to be the last. It helps you to learn that you're not an island. So I remember distinctly, my mom used to have us on the weekends doing cleanup, and we would listen to the blues. And then we would hear those stories. And then, I would hear the stories from reggae. I would hear the stories from hip hop. And I knew that my struggle was not alone. And it, in a sense, offered a form of therapy for me, because what people don't realize that blues and music and storytelling have been therapy for Black people for centuries. So it's like, how do you overcome? And it's kind of from a biblical standpoint, you overcome by the power of the word. The life and death is in the tongue. So my question for you, I guess, with the Emancipation Movement, what is it that you would like to see, or what is it that when the people that come to the Zoom meeting, what type of stories would they receive that's going to help them with their mental health? What is it that they can look forward to?
It's funny that you mentioned mental health, because the thing about the Emancipation Movement rising above the shackles, the Zoom event, the thing about that is we're going to be talking about 8 aspects of Black life. So we have 8 ambassadors for each area of Black life. So we're starting with education, career development, leadership, financial literacy, physical wealth, mental wealth, family, and dream chasing. So mental wealth, mental wellness, that is the ambassador, Kirsten Davis. And she is going to come with her. I don't want to give too much away what she's going to talk about.
Yeah.
But what she's going to show us is the importance of mental health in the Black community and what that looks like. Not really, we could talk about it all day, but coming from where she's from, she works as I don't want to call it a therapist, but a mental health specialist in the juvenile detention center. And so she deals with mental breakdowns and I would say struggles with mental health and emotional stability. And so she's able to give us that look into what it's supposed to look like and what it actually looks like now. Because I feel like we all grew up being told, oh, shut up, don't air your dirty laundry, don't talk about it. Whatever you're dealing with, just
pray for it, bring it out.
Yeah, bring it out. Like,
bring it out.
I mean, we weren't even told that, but shut up and take it. Like you just deal with it. But that's not the way to deal with it. There's so much trauma that we have, and it's like, you got to get it out. One way or another, you got to get it out. And I love that you mentioned storytelling because that's what it is. So sure, each ambassador will be discussing what they'll be discussing. We have Laquan Johnson, Dr. Boyce Watkins, Nikki Aquarella, Wade F. Wilson, Jonathan Bailey. Like, we have so many people. Dr. Adrienne Bradley Gray, she is the ambassador for education. So it's just like, so many people are going to be discussing these things through storytelling. But more importantly, we're going to have roundtable discussion so that you yourself can tell your story. And that was the whole thing of call and response. You know, it needs to be discussed. Like, we're not coming to this event just to hear to talk and then we go. Like, no. Storytelling requires you to give your story as well. Tell your side and then receive it. And it's a back and forth. You know what I mean? And so, like, with mental health, there was so much I didn't know. So much I didn't know about myself and my mental wellness and all that stuff. And it was through conversations, through storytelling, from people telling me what they've been through and what they've done, what they did wrong, and what they should have done. And then they give me that information. And I'm like, I'm in a position where I can take that information and apply it and still come out better. You know, so I'm learning from other people's mistakes, but not because of any choice of my own, but because those individuals were willing to tell their stories. They were willing to let me know the mistakes that they made. And not too many people are willing to do that nowadays. And I do think that's sad. Because we grew up saying, oh, shut up, don't talk about what happened to you. Don't talk about your trauma. But it's like, okay, but if I don't, then how can I expect my baby to be okay when she goes through what she's going to go through? You know what I mean? Like, when I have a child, like, I need to be able to tell them that stuff. But if I grow up being told to be quiet all the time and I actually listen to that and I take that with me, then how will my baby learn how to deal with whatever they're going to go through? We all know they're going to go through it. You can't protect everybody, right? You can't protect your child from everything. Right. So it's like, I need to be a storyteller for my children's sake. And I have to teach them to be storytellers for their children's sake. And that's what generational wealth is. Like, passing down those tools. So, like, sure, my parents didn't give it to me, and it's not their fault. It's because their parents didn't give it to them. It's not their fault because their parents didn't give it to them. You know, but we can break that cycle, and that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what the Emancipation Movement is about. I'm breaking that cycle. So, as much as I want the viewers to be there and stuff, best believe that I plan to take as much from this event as possible. I'm getting free information from all these people, and I'm going to take it and internalize it and then pass it down to the next generation so that my family is going to be set from day one. I'm not playing games. Like, I'm not doing this whole generational curse. Laquan, he loves to call it generational ignorance, which is what his new book is about. Cop that. But it's generational ignorance. And it's like, I'm not, I'm not doing that. I'm tired of hearing so many Black people complain about the same stuff that their parents complained about, that their parents complained about. I'm not being a part of that generation. Sorry. So I'm like, right here, right now, I love these conversations that I have with people because it's like, y'all are giving me so much information. Like, my arsenal is loaded right now. And best believe I'm taking that whole armory and I'm just gonna drop it in my kid's lap. Like, y'all gonna be armed with the same knowledge because it's a wrap. I'm not playing those games. Like, no, we're breaking that cycle.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it on Dad Cypher first, man. Y'all got to be involved with this, with the Emancipation, the Zoom event that's coming on Juneteenth. You definitely got to come out and support because this is going to be healing. This is going to be investment. This is the time that we are using to invest in ourselves. And it's quite fitting that the event is, about freeing the shackles that's taking place on Juneteenth, because even though we were free, we still did not know we were free. And so this is the importance of storytelling. This is the wealth that we want to pass it down. So with that being said, definitely, like I said, come out, support, join the Facebook group, join the movement. And for more information, where can they find you at, Porsche, for more information?
Well, you can go to my Facebook page, Porsche Steele. I'm the only one that has that name, so you will find me on Facebook. And then you can hit us up there. The Emancipation Movement has a Facebook group. You can reach us there. Definitely RSVP, and then we'll be able to talk one-on-one. We're also on Melanated People, Twitter. We're getting our Instagram up soon. So. And then Motivational Motives on YouTube. You can watch that podcast.
Right.
About us and what we do, me and Lauren Johnson. So, yeah.
All right. Well, hey, this is Ace Lawrence Professor hitting you up from Dad Cypher. Like I said, check out this Juneteenth knowledge. We're going to help y'all to pass on wealth instead of dysfunction as family heirlooms. All right, we out. Holla. Okay.